Name's Cate Christianti. I'm a senior Agile coach here at Livestream, and I'm here to talk to you about OKRs. So your vision statement and aspirational statement. Thank you, Sanjeev. Your mission statement, current state, right? So mission statement is where you are, vision is where you're going. So catching up. So we've talked about a couple of vision statements, very aspirational, tomorrow, where you want to be as a company. So Google's today mission statement, right now, their mission statement for today is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. So it's a description of how you do your work today. And I'll kind of skip through the others. But again, it's a little bit more here and now when you're talking about your mission statement. So when we all know where we want to go, hopefully, as a company or within your team or as an individual. You can apply these at kind of any level, depending on your range of authority. So how do you get from your mission to your mission to your vision? And you get there with strategy, right? That's a description of how you're going to get to each place. However, that's still too broad. Your vision statement is this far away thing that you might get to someday. And it's going to take a long time. So you break that out into goals, right? Nice, clear steps that you want to take, things you want to achieve as an organization, whether it's your full company, your team, or yourself, or whatever the product you're responsible for, kind of wherever your sphere of influence is. You can apply all of these to those things. But we all know that's not really how goals work. It's not clean. It's not, goals are actually a little bit more amorphous, right? It's fluid. We don't know. They're non-specific. They help you get towards where you're going, but it's not always clear what success is. So that's where objectives come in. Objectives are specific, measurable steps that bring you closer to your goal. You can see in this picture, I've put objectives a little bit in here. They're fluid. It's not necessarily a straight line, right? But they're helping you. That's a clear target. I know how to get to this dot as opposed to this blue shading. So, for example, you could have a goal of increasing brand awareness. That's a great goal. But to be more specific, you have an objective of increasing brand recognition within a specific community by 20% over the next 2 quarters. That's just an example of taking a goal and making it a little bit more specific. So, and again, you have strategy, not your long overarching strategy like we talked about in the last slide, but just smaller, more simpler strategy, near-term strategy to get from one objective to the next. So again, the goal is a primary outcome. It's typically a broad-based target and allows you to move a little bit closer to your vision. And the objective is a specific measurable step towards the desired outcome kind of within that goal. So the goal, again, the simple goal is brand awareness, and then you can make it a little bit more specific with an objective where I have numbers, I have a target community. I haven't time boxed it, but we understand the idea. And so we're here to talk about OKRs, or objectives and key results. So now we understand the objective is what an objective is, and we can get a little bit deeper. So one thing I want to make sure that we're clear about as we go through this talk is that OKRs in and of themselves are meaningless if you don't have a vision or strategy and goals. Otherwise, it's just another tracking tool where you're trying to do these things that may or may not be related to your everyday work or your product that you're responsible for. So that's why I wanted to talk about strategy first. So once you have a vision, you have some goals, you can outline them and tie them to use these OKR tool that we've all probably heard a little bit about. So again, an objective, specific and measurable step. And the key results are benchmarks that you use to track your project towards that objective. So again, objective is the what, and the key results are the how. And we're using these OKRs to align teams to a common goal. That's really all it is. It's allowing you to be intentional and specific in helping everyone work together. So as we use OKRs, we usually one of the trickiest parts of OKRs is actually how they help you focus. There's a million things you want to do as a team, as a company, as an individual. But you actually, if you're using the OKR framework properly, you actually have to limit yourself a little bit and have no more than 3 objectives at a time per team. And each objective is broken down into only 3 or 4 key results. And you do that so that you can stay focused. You're not going to achieve everything all at once. This is the most important thing that we can work on as a team. And again, as I've been alluding to, if your organization doesn't have OKRs, you can always use it as a tool for yourself because it's just a way of being intentional. Within an organization, they're a wonderful tool because the team, just like in an Agile environment, which we'll talk about later, the teams are empowered to define the how, right? The message is coming from above, so to speak, on what your goals are and what you're trying to achieve. But the team's determining how, and they're also providing a feedback mechanism they're allowing the OKRs to change over time. This is a fluid thing. This is not, here are your objectives and they're never going to change. These are your marching orders. That's not the purpose here. It's just about moving forward with a plan. So just like in lots of other contexts, you want to review your OKRs at least quarterly, and you want to adjust them as needed based on new information, new realities. There's been a significant market change, significant change within your organization, any number of reasons that you would want to revisit the OKRs outside of that quarterly cycle. So, and again, just to reiterate, OKRs are really a draft plan based on the best information available at the time. And they can and should be updated frequently. This is not something you sign in blood. That's not the point of OKRs. Here are some guidelines for what we're trying to accomplish. Let's work together as a team. How will we know we got there? That's what our key results are for. So out in the industry, there's a book that was pretty popular a few years ago called Measure What Matters. I have some industry examples in here just to share. So the city of Syracuse is featured in the book, and they had an objective, just achieve fiscal sustainability. So it's still pretty broad. You could argue that it's a goal, but we understand what they're trying to get after. And they measured that with these key results of reducing the general fund budget variance from 11 to 5%. So it's a specific number. You can know when that's happened. And this is also a really great example because some of the best KRs that I've seen or key results are things that are relative changes and not an absolute change. So they're changing based on what they already have. And then spending 95% of the authorized capital, so not having a lot of extra money. And spending the money that they have for the grants, making sure that they're actually fulfilling their goals. So Allbirds, which is for those of you who aren't familiar with them, they're a sneaker company. They use sort of eco-friendly materials in their shoes. So their goal, one of their objectives, is to create the lowest carbon footprint in our industry. And they're measuring that by establishing a zero waste supply chain, paying off any of their carbon use, and then making sure their first goal is 25% of the material is compostable. So you see they broke it out into some real success criteria, just to use a term us Agilists are familiar with. So a well-defined objective is ambitious, but also while still being realistic, simple, focused on one thing at a time, and concrete. So our ambitious goals, it's a stretch. It's still working towards that vision, that never fully attainable vision, but still bounding it to reality, right? You don't want to make something that was truly never achievable because that's demoralizing for yourself or your team. And it's simple. You solve for one thing at a time, right? The reason there's a limit, as I mentioned a few slides ago, of just three or four is so that you're not trying to solve every problem at a time, but working through it. Sort of it's another WIP limit, so to speak. And it's concrete, and it's tied to a clear and measurable result. Let's rate this objective on these 4 parameters that I just shared on my slide. We want to achieve 100% market share in 3 months. And so to be clear, a good objective would be a balance of all 4 of these things. Looks like we agree. Obviously, it's ambitious, right? 100% market share. That sounds nice. 3 months. I mean, we don't, obviously, this is made up. We don't know what their current market share is, but it's probably not going to be an achievable thing, even in 3 months or any otherwise. So it's right. We agree it's not realistic. It is simple and it is concrete, but it's so unrealistic that it would be something that would potentially demotivate the team and lead to frustration, can make the OKR just a joke in your team because you know that there's nothing, it's not tied to reality or something that's feasible. So it's really important to make sure that it is something that can be done. All right, so moving on to the next one. Rate this one, create an interdepartmental synergy framework for holistic collaboration. I have to say that, frankly, I'm surprised by some of the votes because this is supposed to just be nonsense. This is a nonsense objective, really. It doesn't really mean anything. I mean, use a lot of positive words and things that we like, right? We know we want to have collaboration and a good synergy between departments, but it's, this could mean anything or nothing. So unless this is part of a shared language within your organization, this is not going to, I don't know that we could even call it concrete or realistic. So this is just, but it's not uncommon for people to write objectives like this. This is why I put it in here. It's important that it have language that means something to your team, can be tied back to some form of action and reality. But yep. So, and then the last one. So, what do we think of this one? It's revolutionize company culture, boost sales, and improve product quality. So this is the kind of one that you would want to break up. And you see this type of OKR when, somebody's boxed into the 3, but I want to do all these things. So, because they're all good things on their own, but there are too many different things to focus on. And it would be difficult to, each KR or key result would be tied to one of those. It would be a mess and you would never know what you were really striving for. So that's where it ties back to the simple and concrete. It's revolutionize company culture. Great. Here's some key results for how we can do that. Makes perfect sense. Boosting sales. That also seems like a realistic thing. People are going to want to do that. And improving product quality. Each one good on their own, but as a single objective, it's just you're unfocused. You don't know where you're going. So, all right. So pop you back over to the slides. So that's objectives, something that's just showing you what we're trying to go after. And so the key results, which are the how we'll know we're there, how we know we've gotten there. We've all seen this one before, right? So they're going to be a well-written key result is going to be specific, measurable, actionable, relevant, and time-bound, right? So not every example that I used earlier was a perfect example of this, but it's still something that shows us we know what these are. It's worth we want to make sure we're time-bound, right? Otherwise you're never there. You never know when to measure. And actionable, that example I used with the holistic synergistic framework, it wasn't really actionable as it was written. And of course, measurable. So this one I didn't make, it's not letting me move forward. I didn't make this one interactive, but we're just going to talk about it briefly. So we have a couple of key results. So an objective, boost sales, right? Increase sales revenue for Q4 by 20%. Your original KR might say sell more products, which, anybody have any issues with that one? Is that actionable? Is that clear enough? So, and an alternative would be launch a targeted marketing campaign resulting in a 30% increase in website traffic by the end of Q4. There's a lot in there, but it's specific, it's measurable. You know what you're working on. You're focused on the website, that kind of thing. That's all this is. So the next one, improve customer satisfaction. So first draft, receive positive feedback from customers. What does that look like? What does that mean? How do we know, what's our time frame? So instead, I rewrote it as increase NPS, or the net promoter score, engagement scoring by 20% by the end of Q3. So this is the example I was trying to explain earlier. So this is an increase by 20%. So you're always improving off of where you are today. Doing a relative change, whether you want to go up or down, is a lot easier to understand, a lot more attainable than trying to get to 100% of something or a specific number. It's easier to just improve upon where you are kind of incrementally. Because if you did a 20% increase year over year, that's pretty dramatic over time, or 10% or 5% or whatever makes sense in your context. So another objective, enhance code quality and efficiency, right? Release fewer bugs. We've seen that kind of guidance before. That's not as helpful as, something that's, let's focus on the important things, reduce the number of severity 1 or 2 bugs found post-release by 70% or 75% over the next 2 quarters. So you're focusing on the bugs that have the highest severity level, highest impact. You're not worried about, little nitpicky bugs that may have come in. That's not the metric you're focused on, depending on, what the current state of the software is. So I put together an example for just an average Agile team. Is very generic. It's not tied to anything, but any of you could apply it to your own context. But so the objective of delivering high quality features to customers, right? Improve cross-functional collaboration, enhance automation, quality assurance, innovation and experimentation, right? So all kind of common things that we would think about. Because one of the things I want to make sure that we're clear about is when you're using OKRs, we can tie this into our Agile environment. It's not yet another set of things. So we're just taking what we're already doing and kind of codifying it a little. So high quality features, I'm not going to read everything on the slide because it's too much, but I'm happy to share it after the fact. But completing all the user stories in the backlog with 0 critical defects by the end of each sprint, right? Focus. This is all about focus and achieving user satisfaction for the features delivered. So that you can really break them all down to things like this, right? Enhancing your automation and quality assurance, focusing on end-to-end testing for 80% of the user stories, or whatever your current, whatever incremental improvement makes sense based on where you're at, right? If you're already at 100, that's not a good KR. And then continuing, this one I like a lot, actually, allocating 10% of the team's capacity for exploring and innovative solutions. Depending on your circumstances, sometimes teams feel like they need permission to do that. And if you have this written out in an OKR, it sort of unleashes that freedom where people sometimes feel like they're cheating the backlog or the roadmap or the company goals to go try to experiment a little bit. And this is a nice way to give explicit permission to go do that, whether 10% or whatever percent makes sense. Famously, Google used to have a day a week for that, right? That kind of thing. So I kept it within the Agile teams, but really they often start at the enterprise level and can go to each level of the organization. It is a nice tool to use if it's not coming from the organization, but if it's coming from top down, each one, they should all be related, right? You're not your teams. If you're down in one of these teams, your team's OKR should be directly tied to the program or portfolio that you're a part of. This is a way of tying the organization together. You can have, I have examples that I'm not going to share today of just enterprise level OKRs that really could be distributed across sales and customer service and the technology teams. But it's all tied together. Again, it's to force focus, right? In a world where you can do a million different things, this is do these things so that we as an organization can be successful. And as Scrum Masters, which I think a lot of us are, Agile coaches, right? You can write these types of OKRs just for yourself if you don't have to tie it back to an organizational hierarchy. just improving agile practices and process efficiency. We all know that's a great objective. We should have that objective at all times. But this is when you start adding key results to that, it kind of keeps you focused and shows you a measurable way of how you've made an impact within your team or your organization, right? So conduct one training session a quarter or a month or whatever makes sense for you. Just helps you be a little bit more intentional and deliberate with your team. Helping to reduce sprint rollover, right? Whatever, usually these types of objectives would be tied to your personal goals as well as how things are going within your team. If you think your team needs to really focus on X, Y, or Z, you can write out some key results for yourself to show how you're going to help move the needle on that particular area. So continuous improvement, just talking through retros, working with a product owner. These are all very generic, but it's just another way of codifying the day job of a Scrum Master. I put this in here for the team collaboration and communication. Starting every team meeting with a reminder of the sprint goal is not everybody does it, right? Because we get lost in the day-to-day and we have our boards that we're just walking through and we're just trying to talk through it. But it's another method of just being intentional. We are focused on this as a team. Our small chunk is this. If we're focused on that, we're doing the right thing, whether, helping each other get that done or whatever it needs to be. And it still all kind of gets woven in with the higher order objectives. But I won't read the whole slide for you. So the benefit of doing these OKRs like we've been talking about is, once again, they help you with focus, right? In a world with endless options, OKRs can provide a clear near-term path for the organization, right? We know where we are, but we know we want to go that way, but we don't know exactly which way, right? So that's the OKRs help us be unified on a clear path. Similarly, they align us together. They help make sure that each team and collection of teams and teams are working in alignment towards the same goals. Just like I'm intentionally throwing in all these agile terms, right? It's increased transparency in an organization that's using OKRs at the enterprise level. Everyone's OKRs are supposed to be available to everyone else in the organization. It's all rolled up on a wiki or Confluence or whatever, information sharing you have, so that you can see how it all rolls up together. And it's about empowerment. Even if it can feel top down, it really is. It's telling you the what, it's providing the why, and the teams, just like in an agile context, you're defining the how. How do we know we got there? How are we going to get there? You're still allowed and encouraged to do that. You should be providing feedback on if it doesn't make sense to go that way or you can't go that way. It may start at the top, but it's not one way. And again, it's flexible. They're not supposed to be mindless, right? This is the target that made sense at the time. Things change, just like we talk about in our agile context. If there's a better plan because things change, that's more important than mindlessly following the original plan. So it should be a conversation with you and your team members. If you have people who are reporting to you, or you and your manager, or however, wherever you fit in the hierarchy, it's always are we working towards the right thing is a good question to ask, whether you're in the OKR framework or not, really. So just to briefly tie it together with an agile setting, OKRs fit in here. It's pretty common to have an annual review cycle of the vision and strategy at an organizational level or a team or department. You have OKRs come in as a quarterly or more frequently, whatever makes, but usually at least quarterly. And that, if you're in the product space in the agile world, it really the OKRs should actually feed directly into the product roadmap. They may be, not necessarily one-to-one, but they should be pretty strongly informing the product that you're working on. And then, which again feeds into the team backlog, which, as we all know, is continuously prioritized. So from a planning horizons perspective, we have this roadmap comes in. Our portfolio OKRs are tied to that. Our quarterly planning is tied to program level OKRs and then team level OKRs. And it's the same throughout. It's not, point being, they can peacefully coexist. And you tie it all back together with just the sprinkle, like I mentioned a moment ago. At the end of the sprint, you're tracking your progress on an MMP, right? You're not just saying, did we hit our sprint goals, but how are we doing towards that feature or that epic? Are we done? Should we keep going? Yes, no, right? What came out of the demo? How does that tie into our product mode roadmap? Are we still going in the right direction? Are we focused on the right things? And that links back to the OKR. So they can all peacefully coexist. So if you decide to try them either for yourself or you've been told you need to do them, just remember it's not a silver bullet if it doesn't work, if you don't have a clear vision or strategy. Otherwise, it's just another list of things that you're supposed to do. So make sure that you have strategy and goals before you get started. Don't be rigid when you're measuring success. Sorry. All right. So we're going to say, don't use your OKRs without a goal and a vision. Start with strategy and vision. If that hasn't been made clear to you, you can try to do it for yourself or for your team. If you aren't able to influence that change, be rigid. Don't be rigid. This is not, we're trying to set people up for success. They're just a way to make it clear what you should be working towards, not, it's not a trap. And don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Organizations can spend months or quarters writing the OKRs, which is not the point. Start simply and just try. It's really all that you need to do. And then just remember to kind of balance, like we were doing on the scorecard, being ambitious, realistic, simple, and concrete. Try to balance all four of those things. And hopefully it'll work out for you.